Hey, it's Dan here from The Plague. Welcome to another episode of Hidden Gems. This is the show where we take a look at a couple of classic albums, at least classic in our view, that maybe have been kind of underrated over the years. And we kind of go into our experience discovering the albums and then, what makes the album so good and maybe some thoughts on like why it perhaps hasn't got the acclaim it is we think it's due over the years. So joining me today is Nels, one of the other founders of The Plague.
Hello.
So we're going to start this week with your choice. If you want to go ahead and introduce the album and take it away.
Yeah, and we were just talking. I wish I had the actual physical album here to show, but I don't. But anyway, I'm gonna go with "For Those Who Dare" by Chastain. And really, I think Chastain in general is kind of a hidden gem, kind of a band that, for whatever reason, never really got the acclaim that I felt they deserved. And I think some of it at the beginning was probably because they were Chastain initially came out as part of that Mike Varney shredder thing, where there were just all these albums coming out that were mostly instrumental shredding guitar music, and Chastain was kind of in that mix. But I think really he's a much broader, as a musician and as a band. They're certainly not just a shred band, even though he's very good at that kind of guitar playing and stuff. But I think a lot of the shredders were like, hey, this is actually more of a well-rounded metal album for their first album. And a lot of the people that maybe would be more interested in a well-rounded metal album maybe didn't pick it up on it because they thought it would be just shredding. But anyway, in my opinion, he's put out many good albums over the years with various lineups. And For Those Who Dare, I believe it was their first album with a new drummer and a bass player, and they got really just exceptional players for both of those. There's some really excellent bass playing in particular on the album. Some places where the guitar and the bass trade off little solos and stuff. It's very cool. But overall, it's really just a very straightforward, very, very heavy album. There's a lot of fast stuff on it. There's quite a bit of variety though too. And I think as far as the vocals go, I think Leather's vocals are probably a little bit of an acquired taste for some people, but I think some of the best singers in metal fall into that same category too. So yeah, for me, the vocals are really, really strong. The production, I thought the production was fine. There's apparently some controversy about how the band really didn't get input on how it was mixed, and there's an anniversary edition. I can't remember how many years later, where the band apparently actually did get to have some say in a remix, and I haven't heard that one. I'm sure it's fine. But yeah, I mean, those are just kind of the general high points for me for the album. It's got some really, really strong songs on it. The Mountain Whispers and For Those Who Dare. But yeah, that's my sort of overview of it, I guess.
What was your first introduction to Chastain? Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. So when I was working at the Record Garden, Shrapnel was one of those labels that just really, they sent us just about everything as a promo so we could play them in the store. So a ton of the Shrapnel stuff we would just get in a box full of demo copies, and we'd be able to hear them and play them that way. And I think it was Ruler of the Wasteland. Anyway, one of the very early albums came through, and we, like we did with any free record, we put it on and played it, and that was one that pretty much everybody at the store liked, and so we played it quite a bit. But yeah, that was the first introduction to Chastain, and I think ever since then, ever since the first album, even he's put out some really solid albums just in general. They had always really good players. And even though, there was a new drummer on For Those Who Dare, I think a lot of his stuff in the past, he'd used Ken Mary for drums, and he's a fantastic drummer.
Yeah.
So I thought pretty much every Chastain album that I've heard has been pretty solid, especially those earlier ones.
Yeah, the first time I heard them, I think was probably you had played me Ruler of the Wasteland or taped me a couple songs or something from it. I can't remember, but then I bought the first one I bought was Seventh of Never, which just loved that album. It was like so heavy and fast, and it was just
yeah. In general, the Chastain, he's heavier than you remember, faster than you remember in a lot of ways. And again, I thought just kind of broadly solid heavy metal that I've always felt like should have appealed to a wider audience, even though he has, quite a following. Just in general, the music I thought was strong enough to justify a much broader audience.
Even the CJSS band, which at the time I remember everyone was like, oh yeah, that's the kind of more commercial side of things. And, I kind of avoided those because I'd heard that, but I go back and listen to those now. And it's like, especially the first album, World Gone Mad, it's actually pretty heavy and it's a pretty solid album.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing that Chastain tended to do, especially I think later he was on his own label. Can't quite remember.
Oh yeah. But, Leviathan.
Yeah. Right. And it seemed like, he did several of CJSS, and I think there was a Leather solo project. Just like kind of a lot of material coming out that was all broadly related, I guess, to Chastain.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot of it out there. There's quite a bit of music.
I remember when The Voice of the Cult came out, I heard it somewhere. We probably got a promo of it or something, and I was kind of like, this just kind of sounds like the last album, but not as memorable. And so that's why I don't think I even heard For Those Who Dare when it came out. But then, like in the late '90s or something, I think maybe I heard it over when I was visiting you or something, and I was like, holy crap, this is like an amazing album.
Yeah, it really is a standout album. And you're probably right. There was at some point, I think there was so much Chastain related stuff that had come out that maybe people weren't paying as much attention, and actually certainly I wasn't either.
Yeah.
Stuff just kind of started flying under my radar. But yeah, that's a great way to miss some really epic, great albums like For Those Who Dare.
Yeah. You mentioned the bass playing too. And that was the first album that had, I made some notes here. David Barber on bass, and then Jean-Luc Hébert on drums. I don't know if you did any research on this, but I was looking up like what else those guys have done, and they were both in King Diamond's band.
Oh, is that right?
They both played on House of God, which is another kind of underrated album, I think. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense. I think people that are there's a bunch of musicians out there that just are either maybe session musicians or jump from band to band that are really excellent. Just because you don't they aren't with the same band for as long, or they aren't founding members of a band or whatever, they don't maybe get the attention that they deserve. But yeah, the bass playing in particular on this album I thought was fantastic. And the drumming really solid, and there's lots of really up-tempo stuff, quite a bit of fast stuff on this album too.
And the production on it is, or maybe it's the mix, but it's a lot like drier, and you can hear the instruments a lot better than. That was the one thing about the Seventh and Never that always kind of bugged me, was it was really reverby and just that kind of mid to late '80s.
Yeah,
it was kind of hard to pick out what was going on sometimes. Yeah,
and I think it's ironic because, like you said, to me the mix is actually quite good because you can hear everything, but I guess one of the complaints that the band had was that it was just kind of a very dry first take mix, and that they didn't get a chance to either participate in the mix or critique it or whatever. But at the same time, I feel like it actually works fairly well. And
Yeah.
you can hear the vocals really clearly. You can hear all the little bass parts really clearly. So I certainly did not mind the mix.
Yeah, out of all their albums, for them to like want to go back and remix, that was like the one I was like, really?
Yeah, and I was when I was looking at this, I started looking back because again, Chastain has so many albums. I don't have all of them in formats that I can actually easily listen to,
Right.
and I still like owning mostly CDs, but whatever. And a lot of his stuff, I think, has either been out of print for so long, or it was on such small labels, maybe that some of it's very expensive to obtain these days. Kind of too bad. It would be really awesome to have a lot of that stuff back out.
I did notice that he's got a lot of his stuff on Spotify, but one thing I found was curious was like they have both the remaster and the original or the remix or whatever of for those who did are on there, but neither of them have Barracuda.
Oh yeah, right.
Like, you didn't want to pay for the copyright on that or something.
Yeah, that I'm sure those sorts of deals are very complicated.
Right.
There's probably some, it's licensed for this type of format, but not, maybe not for electronic distribution or something. It's a good cover. I mean, it's what you would expect, of course. It's a very straightforward cover of Barracuda, which lends itself to being a very good heavy metal song anyway.
Yeah. It was like kind of the perfect song for Chastain to cover.
Yeah, and with Leather's vocals, obviously, sounds great.
Cool. All right. Well, I'm going to choose Black Sabbath's Tear, which I have on CD still, and something like that. And actually, I remember when I bought this, it was I think it was September 1990. Somewhere in there, and it was at the original location of CD World in the Kazel building in Eugene. Right. And I bought it at the same time I bought Rust in Peace. Like I got those two CDs that day because they were both came out around that time. And I think I'm probably the only person in the world who's actually listened to this album more than Rust in Peace, as much as I love Rust in Peace. But yeah, this has just been like one of my favorite albums since it came out. And I know, Black Sabbath's one of those bands. It's like everyone's got their own favorite era. So there's people that love the Ozzy stuff and don't consider anything else to be legitimate Sabbath. There's people that love Dio, but yeah, Tony Martin is pretty much generally the least well regarded, probably because he didn't have a name before, joining the band, and it was just Tony at that point. But I think the first three albums that they did, Eternal Idol, Headless Cross, and Tear were all like really solid albums. And if people had a chance to judge them just on their own merits and not like in comparison with, some of the greatest albums of all time, then they would be a lot better regarded at this point. But yeah, I think the other problem with Tear was it came out right between Headless Cross and Dehumanizer, which were both like super high profile for, different reasons. But
right.
And it just kind of seemed to go under the radar. Like, I didn't really hear much about it. Out of all the albums now, when people go back and talk about Black Sabbath albums, it's the one I hear about the least. It's like people talk more about Forbidden just because everyone hates it so much, or 13 or whatever. But it's got like, it's not a super long album. I think it's like about 39, 40 minutes, but it flows really well. It's got like kind of the entire spectrum of Black Sabbath sound. It's got, kind of the epic sort of feel of some of the Dio stuff. It's got the more straightforward rock and roll kind of songs. It's got the Sabbath Stones, which is like a really doomy, slow, heavy song. It's got that 3-part trilogy thing in the middle. It's got, Jeff Nichols doing a really cool kind of symphonic keyboard intro, and then it goes into Odin's Court, which is like, kind of a, clean guitar bit, and then just goes perfectly into Valhalla, which is like, big, heavy, kind of rousing sort of song. I think one mistake they definitely made was the only video they released for it was for the ballad, Feels Good to Me, which I think it's a great song. It's like, it's got like a nice heavy chorus, so it's not just a, you know, straight ballad like No Stranger to Love or something, but yeah, it just was not a good, I didn't think it was a good choice to represent the album at all. And especially for, you know, people who, the big thing about Headless Cross was like, oh, it's a return to their heavier, you know, darker sound. And then it's like, okay, and then the next album, oh, here's a ballad, you know, it's like, oh, okay, maybe not the best way to go, especially in 1990 when you had albums like Rust in Peace coming out. But the other thing that I think gets overlooked a lot is the lyrics in this album were actually pretty good. That was one of my complaints with Headless Cross, was it just like they were trying a little too hard to make it like kind of evil and spooky, and I don't know, it just didn't come across as very authentic, and this just seems to have a lot more quality to it in terms of the lyrics.
Are the lyrics mostly written by Tony Martin?
I think so. That's a good question. I didn't actually look that up. I think the songs are just credited to the band or something, but I'll do some research and put some little text on here correcting myself.
With your mouth moving. And
yes. The other thing that I think is a big improvement over Headless Cross is I always thought Headless Cross sounded kind of clunky, and again, kind of like when I was talking about Something Never, like it just like a little too much reverb on things, and just clarity wasn't there. And this sounds a lot better. And it's the same production team. It's Tony and Cozy doing the production, and I think even the same guy mixing it. So it's like,
all right,
kind of bizarre, but let me see here, check my notes. Oh yeah, just having Neil Murray and Cozy Powell in the band, it's just kind of like, and Neil Murray's one of those players like you were talking about earlier that doesn't really get a lot of credit because he's did like bit pieces in a bunch of different bands, but yeah, he's pretty amazing. Like his bass playing is really solid. So
even Cozy Powell, I think for some people falls into that category, even though he's I think probably in people that are in the know, he's obviously super highly regarded because he was awesome. But again, he kind of throughout his career jumped around to a lot of different bands.
And the other thing I was just going to comment on this is one of those albums that for whatever reason has never gotten like a remaster or an expanded edition, you know, like the way Eternal Idol did.
Yeah.
It's never been repressed on vinyl, so the vinyl copies out there are like $50 to $150. You know,
yeah,
they're crazy.
Funny that Forbidden, for some reason, has gotten, maybe they're bootlegs, but there's so many vinyl versions of that in every color of the rainbow. It's bizarre.
Yeah, that is bizarre. I mean, it must be bootlegs, but why would you bootleg that?
Yeah, the mind of the bootleg record industry is definitely difficult to to understand sometimes.
And I would just blame, you know, like Ozzy and Sharon for like not wanting anything that wasn't Ozzy related to be released at this point under the Sabbath name, but they did do that. You know, they did reissue Seven Star and Eternal Idol with, you know, deluxe versions, and I don't see any reason why they couldn't do that. And Dehumanizer, actually, they just reissued that on vinyl like a couple of years ago. So anyways, yeah, so that's my case for Tear. I don't know what your memories of that album are.
You know, honestly, I don't have that many of them, and I should have. I don't actually own a copy of it, so it's not in my library of songs that I play. I should have picked it up just to give it a little listen before this, but I didn't. So yeah, I actually have very few memories of it. I think I own there was a 7-inch and a 7-inch picture disc off the albums. I own those, but just obviously just for the collectible stuff. But I probably need to pick it up just to, I mean, I know that I know that Cozy Pal is awesome. I know that Tony's awesome. I should probably give that one another chance and just you know, see if it has changed for me over the years.
Right. Yeah, it's weird how you go back to certain albums that you were kind of like Voice of the Cult I was talking about earlier. Like at the time, it was like, oh, this just seems kind of mediocre. But I listen to that now, and it's like, oh, this is actually a great album.
It's interesting how often that happens, where in the moment you remember your memory of the thing, and then it's vastly different later. Like sometimes crazy different. Yeah, there's been a lot of albums like that for me where I remember getting them, I remember hearing them and thinking, whatever. And then later I'm like, okay, this is now one of my favorite albums.
Anyways, cool. So I think we'll call it good for this one. If anyone out there watching this has some opinions on either of these albums, feel free to put it in the comments, and love to hear what other people's experiences were. And hopefully at least one or two people will discover these albums for the first time and fall in love with them. And please like this video if you get a chance, and subscribe to our channel. And yeah, thanks for joining me again, Nels.
Yeah, no problem.
So take it easy, everybody, and stay metal.